Well, we now continue our weekly land report segment with the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. President of the group, Tony Toso, joins us now with the latest. Tony, thank you so much for being here. Boy, I know you guys are dealing with it out there as far as those weather concerns. So we talk about several years of severe drought out there in California. Then a series of atmospheric rivers have occurred and triggered the reemergence of the Tulare Lake, which vanished about 130 years ago. So tell us a little bit about this lake. What's going on now?
Yeah, it's a little interesting. So the Tulare Lake was once the largest body of fresh water west of the Mississippi River. And it recently reemerged in Kings County, and that's in the southern San Joaquin Valley of California, here in California, after disappearing in the late 1800s. Now, history's telling us that for thousands of years, going back to the Paleolithic era, the Stone Age, into the late 19th century, this lake once supported the largest population of Native Americans north of what's now present-day Mexico. Now, this isn't the only time that the lake has returned since the 1800s. The lake has made a couple of reappearances since those days, but that really only happens during unusually high levels of rainfall or snow like we've been having. And it happened back in like 1942, the late 60s, 1983, and into the late 1990s. Now, the last time it was a significant return was in 1983. And it took about 2 years for the water to dissipate or evaporate and be gone again. Now, the recent resurgence, that was triggered by roughly a dozen atmospheric river storm events you were talking about starting last year. And it appears that the most recent ones that we are now experiencing aren't going to have the impact that last year did. Our reservoirs are in a position to absorb the moisture, so we're in a pretty good spot right now. Now, at its historical peak, the lake was reported to be about 100 miles long by 30 miles wide, or about 690 square miles. And at its deepest point, it's about 25 or 30 feet, as I'm told. And like we touched on a minute ago, the lake has historically been fed by snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada mountains. And it comes down into the lake bed from rivers like the Kings, Kaweah, Kern, White, and the Tule rivers. But at this time, none of these rivers are putting water into that lake bed, and historically, outflows have been by evaporation or seepage into the San Joaquin River.
Wow, I just find this so interesting that it's there, it's not there. Any impacts, or does it affect local agriculture at all when it does resurge?
Yeah, that's a pretty big area of farm ground. Since last spring, they've moved tens of thousands of cows that had to be relocated. And recently I read that the Kings County Ag Commissioner had estimated about this time last year that the county's agricultural damages would exceed about $300 million. And that's with tomatoes, cotton, and pistachio crops, kind of the major crops grown in that area. And there's likely to be more costs to consider when we factor in property damages, but the final numbers are still yet to be known. A bright spot from the lake's resurgence could be the use of these waters for replenishment of groundwater levels. Yeah. Experts are currently looking at ways to put floodwaters like these back underground. We call it banking out here, which would serve as a secondary purpose of recharging the overdrafted aquifers we have. So, and also I'm hearing there's renewed calls by the ag community, which is no surprise, to get after it with creating more water storage here, which has just always been a problem for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And nice to have that banked, but boy, so hard for those who are getting hit with all of that trouble. Thank you so much, Tony. Tony Toso with the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers.